focus and sort of pay attention and get things done. And Tuesday in class is going to be the same way. You're going to have to focus, really hang with me, get some good notes there, because I'm going to go over this paper a couple times and get you going. Our paper is going to be called A History of a Word Paper. And so the history of the word paper, you're going to write the history of a word. And you're going to start with this word when it came into the English language. You're going to go through some of its meanings today. Now, when it comes to words, you ask yourself, John Joseph, what is a successful word for this paper? Words you're looking for are words that have a whole bunch of meanings. Words you're looking for are words that may have rare ancient meanings that no one knows. It has to be an English word. You cannot come up with a word from Sanskrit. It has to be a word that, has been around English for a while. So usually the words that work are ones that have been in the language for at least 500 years. You're looking for pretty old words. Some of you will come up with the words and they will be ancient words.
Can you come up with a word that is not in English but can translate it in English easily?
No, I want an English word because I want you to use the OED.
Okay.
Anyway, that's our source that we're looking for. I am now going to babble on a little bit about the history of the English language. If you ever wonder why we have so many words in English that sound the same but mean something different, they sound the same but they're spelled different, such as night, like nighttime, N-I-G-H-T, and the dude that rides on the horse and is covered with armor, K-N-I-G-H-T. Or if you're conjugating verbs in English and you think to yourself, go, how do I get from go, going to went? How do we switch over to went here? How come some words we have an ED ending for past tense? How come some words we have a T ending for past tense? Like, how come it sounds T, but it's spelled ED, like jumped? How come we don't say jumped? All of those things, the be verbs, am, then we jump over to was. How do you go from am to was? A-M to W-A-S, that doesn't make sense. So I'm going to chat with you and show you why English can be so difficult sometimes as far as the grammatical constructions. It is not mishmash, it is not anything, it's just the way it was. So if we started off with England, and this is England. Wow, it's an ugly map. Remember I was telling you about my drawing. There's Ireland. This is England. There were random original inhabitants here, such as Picts. One of the people were called Shoats. And then at some point, probably BC, the Celts came in and kind of took over everything. And when they did such a thing, the Shoats, I think, were actually living over here. The Celts came in here. I say Celt with a C and I say Celt, but if you say Celt, or if you spell it with a K, I won't fight you. They whipped these poor Picts, and the Picts went over to Ireland, and the Shoats drifted up over here into Scotland. By the way, I am summarizing and generalizing horribly, and the Shoats eventually became Scots, and that's how that came. Anyway, so we didn't have just one language. We had all these little tribes here, and then all these little Celtic tribes, they weren't united as one country. They were a bunch of little tribes that each had their own little dialect, their own little way of talking that changed over hundreds of years. Then let's say around 45 AD, the Romans rolled in here and pretty much conquered everybody. And so the Romans spoke Latin. And so for about 13 or 1400 years, you've got this Celtic, Scottish, Pictish mixture going on here in the English island. They've drifted over and became Irish Gaelic and Scottish Gaelic and a lot of things like that. But the Celts were speaking some language of Celtic at this time. The Romans come in with Latin. And so suddenly the church is 100% in Latin. So all the religion of the people, when the place becomes Christianized for about 1,000 years, is in Latin. So what happens with this is, it's like us with Spanish. We may not know Spanish, but there are a lot of Spanish words in our language that might not have been here 200 years ago. If I say to any of you, taco, nacho, tostito, whatever, you pretty much know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of Spanish words that have come into the English language. hacienda, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, a whole bunch of, so the Romans brought in a lot of Latin words into the language. The Romans ended up leaving. When they leave in high school, they'll basically teach you Germanic tribes came in. That would be about 500. Angles, Saxons, and Jutes were the main ones. And that's where Anglo is where the word English comes from. There were also Franks. You're also going to learn after a while Frisians, which are some islands off the coast of the Netherlands. So there are actually a whole bunch of Germanic people that came in here. They ended up bringing their own languages with them. And so each one of their little languages, even though they were a form of German, or Proto-German probably, they all sort of never quite matched together perfectly. They all each have their own little dialects. So if you go to England today, there are different people over there with all those different English dialects. For example, down in Kent, that's where most of the Jutes settled. There's a river that runs through there called the Humber, pronounced U-M-B-E-R, but it is spelled H-U-M-B-E-R. If you ever go to Texas on the north side of Houston, there's a city on the north side of Houston called Humble, Texas. It's spelled H-U-M-B-L-E, like humble, but pronounced Humble. That is a Kentish dialect. When there was a H-U sound, they did not pronounce the H. Weird little thing about them. So if you wonder why we say K-N-I-G-H-T, that might have came from a Saxon word. The Angle word might have been, their word night might have meant nighttime, N-I-G-H-T. It wouldn't have been spelled that way, but they might have had two different words. This kind of night was spelled Connecta, or pronounced Connecta is how it was. And when you listen to how people would have talked in English, they made us memorize the prologue to the Canterbury Tales. But this was written, did Geoffrey Chaucer write? 1300s. It would sound something like this. So even something as late as 1300 sounds much more Germanic than it does like we talk. And they would say, Juan that opera with his shoulders suta, the drucht of March hath pierced to the ruta, and bothered every vena in switch liqueur, of which vertu engendered is the floor. When Zephyrus echo with his sweat of breath, it hath in every holt and head. So even like 13 something, that's what English sounded like when someone was talking, even though I probably butchered it brutally with an American accent. You know what I mean. Anyway, so we've got all these things going on. So if you wonder why go might have been Angle, went might have been a Judish version, that's how that may have happened. Then Canute, who was the king of the Danes, he came over and conquered about 800-ish. So suddenly we've got a Danish infusion into the language. Then those horrible Vikings. I, by the way, have Viking male DNA, so my Richardson ancestor was a Viking. Vikings kind of settle all over England and Scotland, but especially on the eastern coast. They brought in a bunch of, their language was Old Norse, so a bunch of Old Norse words came into the English language, and that influenced things. Then after them, when William the Conqueror came in, he and his Norman knights spoke a version of French. So suddenly there were a bunch of French stuff going on. King Henry VIII doesn't banish the Catholic Church until 1548. So for 1,500 years, Catholicism has been pouring this into the language. And when William the Conqueror conquered in 1067 until 1204, all the business was done, because they still spoke French, the rich people did who were in charge. So all the business that was done in England, as far as governmental business, was done in French up for a couple hundred years. So when you look at the language, this is how the language got weird. We've got all these influences in the language. All these words came in the language. They get conjugated differently. That's why English is weird. So what you're going to do is you're going to look for a nice word that is a good old word. I'm going to give you some examples of words that you can play around with. When I do my examples, you're not allowed to do these, unfortunately. You can't steal my examples. But the first one I go with is the word stoke. S-T-O-K-E. It's not a real common word, but when you guys say stoke, you usually say, man, I'm stoked, meaning I'm lit, I'm happy, I'm fired up, whatever you're going to say about that one. So when we look at the word stoke, stoke has a whole bunch of meanings going way back when. The first thing would mean it was a verb, I don't know if this is the first, but it meant to poke or stab. It's a little bit related to the word pike, which was a weapon, and stoke meant to stab someone. There are all these stories. He did stoke the evil dragon with his pike and killed it. But that's kind of what stoke meant, to poke or stab something. Stoke, by the way, going back all the way in the poking and stabbing, they would always have a little sexual meaning in stoke. You know, we had a picnic and I did stoke her under the pear tree. You know what I mean? They would have some line like this in all these old kind of naughty little poems that they used to write way back when, that they would talk about things. So originally that's what stoke meant. Now the other word we have for stoke, definition we still use today, is to stir up a fire. So when the fire's kind of down to coals, you get the poker, you kind of stoke up the fire. You know what I mean? We still kind of use that. It's not common, but people still say it all the time. So you can sort of see how we went from to stab someone or poke someone to now I'm stoking the fire and I'm stirring up the fire. It's kind of a natural progression. The other thing the Brits said, stoke meant, they would use stoke. I wish I got something where I could throw that right now, which meant the bend in a river. So Stoke meant the bend in a river. So a lot of British cities are named something like Stoke-on-Trent, which is the Trent River, or Stoke-on-Lyne. We would say bend in a river. So let's say there was a river going like this and the river did this. They would call that a stoke in the river, where the river thrust northward and then came back down and made like a stabbing motion there. And the thing about rivers when they do this, because they all built castles back then, if I built a castle right here, I've got a nice moat that I don't have to spend money digging. I've got a 3-sided moat on my river already, on my castle already. And all I've got to do is pretty easy to build a canal from here to here. And I've got my own moat, and cities often developed around castles. So that's where Stoke-on-Trent or Stoke-on-Lyne, they still say that today. So the bend in a river. The other thing with all these stokes, they can be used as a noun and a verb. So this might have started out as a verb, and then it might become a noun. So I might say, I drew my sword and stoked the evil dragon through the breast. Or somebody might have looked at me killing the dragon from afar and said, Richardson's ferocious stoke slayed the dragon. You know, they're talking about my action as a noun, kind of like we would do today. He is running fast, or we could say Coulter had a really great run on Saturday. So the word can change from a verb to a noun, but sort of keep the same meaning. So there's a lot of things like this with stoke. Then the other thing is this version of to stir up a fire is sort of what you guys would say today when you talk about being stoked about something. When you talk about being stoked, you're basically saying, my life was kind of normal, something awesome happened, it stirred up this fire of energy and joy and emotion in me, and now I'm stoked. You know what I mean? So it's what you're actually saying is some situation in life has been like a poker that has stirred me up, and suddenly I'm full of positive energy and joy and this, that, and the other. Then the next meaning of stoked is kind of like being lit. You might be talking about getting high a little bit. So you can sort of see how different definitions of stoke existed throughout time, and sort of how this word has changed. So you understand, when we look at words, this is what we're looking for. The other thing that does very well on this, if you want to put this in your notes, is if you find a word that has a weird, random meaning that no one knows. But there's a lot of words we can think of. And by the way, my examples are off limits to you. How about the word pop? What are some definitions of pop?
Like onomatopoeia, like sound.
The sound, and what's yours?
Popcorn.
What is it?
Like popcorn.
Like popcorn?
Pop, like as in like soda. Some people.
Soda pop. What about a verb?
Punch 'em.
Pop
Oh, you
something
shoot
like
someone?
like a balloon. Yeah, you pop somebody with a gun. That's slang, but that works. A lot of things with pop. Oh, my father Some people call their dad Pop. That's more slang. So there's a lot of things like that when we talk about pop. There's a lot of meanings of pop. How about this one, the word run? We got the thing run. Then we got the noun run and the verb run. What are some other words for that run means?
Run as in like run for office.
Yes.
Or like we were like running like a program on a computer.
Yep, being in charge of something or downloading something. That's actually probably two things. I was like President Marie Griffith runs the college. So that's actually five things. How about a run in somebody's pantyhose? I scored a run in the baseball game.
Running with the cops.
I had a run in with the cops. You understand where we're coming from? Words like that with a lot of meanings. You want a word with a bunch of meanings. One person, volleyball player a few years ago, wrote a word on the paper, set. The word set has hundreds of meanings. It's way out there. You know, you've got the set in volleyball. You've got the setter set the ball. You've got the Irish setter, like the dog that is setting down on a bird. You've got all kinds of meanings of set. You know, a chess set, like a set of pieces in a game or something. Whole bunch of sets. There's hundreds of them that we've never even heard of before. There are a bunch of words like this. That's kind of what you're looking for. Now, you don't really need a word with like set with hundreds of words. Mostly all you need is about, if there's 10 words, 10 meanings of your word, that is about all you need for your paper. You're only going to do 4 to 6 definitions in this paper. If you're taking notes right now, Dalton, you're only doing about 4 to 6 definitions. So the only reason I want you to find a word with 10 is just so you've got some backup definitions in case one of them doesn't work for you. All right?
So the word can't be like a unique word that's like not used very often.
Correct. You need one that has multiple meanings. So if you got a great word with 3 meanings, it's not quite going to work for you. So let's go back to the Oxford English Dictionary. My computer is hibernating right now. So it'll be a bit before I get there. But back to the Oxford English Dictionary. And I want you to type in the word stoke. S-T-O-K-E. And when we're back at the OED, I am typing in stoke. We're going to see what we're getting. By the way, if you end up being off campus, there's a way to get online off campus, but I don't have any idea what it is. So if you get confused with that, you need to send an email to Mary Frances. When we look at stoke on the search result and type it in, the first thing we see is stoke the noun, stoke the verb, stoke another noun, stoke another noun. Oh, it's something with kinematic viscosities. Stoke another verb, and then stoke the verb. So let's click on our click on our second one, stoke the noun, a thrust with a weapon or a stab. And we just have one meaning right there for stoke. So that's one. I'm looking for another one. How about stoke a stoke is a yard in measurement. That's a good one. I click on stoke the noun. I again just have one meaning. This was not what I was looking for. How about the bottom one, stoke the last verb? Let's see. All right, so when you click on stoke, the bottom verb on there, about the 7th entry, when you click on there, you see 1, to feed, to stir up, to stoke in a fire. Then we scroll down figuratively, we have a B, we have a C, and then we jump down to number 2. There's another definition of stoke. So sometimes when you see 7 definitions there, you've actually got more than one definition. So like transferred to feed oneself or another, as in stoking a furnace, like stuffing food in your mouth. So, instead of feeding the fire to build the fire up, we might say, if we go over to the cafeteria, wow, look at that big kid stoking his face. He's just cramming food in his mouth. So that's kind of what it meant next. Then we have a lot of compound words that it throws up and a lot of derivatives of stoke. So anyway, when you look at stoke there, a lot of times when you click on, you may find a word that you like, you're sort of interested in, and then you click on a bunch of these words, and you find, and there may only be 3 definitions, you think, oh man, it doesn't work. Then you click on some of those definitions, and you may find 100 different definitions under one of your main definitions. You may have 100 sub-definitions. Those kind of work. So one of the things we're doing here right now is I want you guys to sort of search around on the OED for the next few minutes in class and I want you to come up with a list of a few potential words. By the way, cuss words don't work. Those papers have all been written like back in the 70s. People wrote all those papers on cuss words. The F word is one of the oldest words in the English language. It's been around since the beginning of English, Old English Beowulf times. People were dropping F-bombs. It's always been a serious cuss word, but pretty much most of the cuss words are old words. Sometimes it's kind of fun to look at them. For example, the past tense, the verb, which is a past tense of one cuss word, is the word shat. Past tense of pooing. And so you look at that word, I just like the way it sounds, you know, and I think about people's names. William Shatner. It's like, what does that mean? How did he get this name? It was probably a very offensive name back in then. I don't know what it even meant, but I imagine how they got their names. If you can't think of anything, start with your own name. If your own name is of English or German descent, you can Google that one, and just look through your own name there. We're going to fiddle around with that. If you can't think of anything, just pick words that you like. Random nouns work. Random verbs work. Something like table. Something like rock. You can think of some words that have very specific meanings, like onion. Onion's probably not going to work well. But off you go. Forgot to tell you, a kid wrote a great paper on the word gun one time. G-U-N, gun. And one of the things that I learned about this is one of the things they wrote about was the phrase son of a gun, and where that phrase came from. And when boats had big cannons, were 10 feet long way back when the boats pulled into port, a bunch of sailors and soldiers on the boats. In England, a lot of prostitutes would go and they would just drape a large blanket or cloth over the giant cannon, and it would sort of make its own little tent, and then the prostitute would do her business, or his business, with these soldiers who hadn't been around anybody in months. They were willing to spend their money. And so, of course, children ended up being produced through these unions. And so, if this was 500 years ago, and I called someone a son of a gun, I am saying, you don't know who your dad is, your mom was a prostitute, and you were conceived under a gun. So you can see how even now, you know, if I call you a son of a gun, you don't even like, you know, if I'm like, okay, you son of a gun, you can stop using you in your papers. Nobody even cares, but back 500-800 years ago, that would have been very offensive to call someone son of a gun, but the part of the word is kind of passed out of our language. It's not a embarrassing thing or it's not an offensive thing to say anymore. You learn a lot of crazy things in these papers with words. Fire's a great word, blood's a great word. Come up with something you like. Wood is a great word.
How's this word?
What's your word? Am?
Arm.
Arm, yes. Like a man at arms. The thing coming off your shoulder. He was armed, you know, armed to the teeth.
Well, actually, when I looked at the definition
Oh,
of arm, there actually wasn't one for like a weapon. It was talking about like the military as like a branch of arms, but
Yep.
it never talked about an actual weapon itself.
Somewhere in one of those arm.
It's probably in there
that's probably
somewhere,
in the list, yeah. They also use the term, we had 600 men under arms, meaning like
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's what it says. Yeah, right here.
And also like in someone's, like a coat of arms.
Yep.
That always works. What do you think, Mike? Kind of good word? What is it? Stable. Yes, I'm in stable condition. It's a place where horses live. Something that's steady. Man, there's all kinds of meanings there. And you click on some of those meanings.
Specifically, because there's that phrase,
That would be a great title. You can use it as an intro to the stable paper if you want to. Hey, what are you looking at? Word. Shot or shoot, yeah. By the way, sometimes if you do a past tense of a word like shoot, you may end up at the original one, shot. Although this kind of shoot will also have, like shoots from a plant or something like that. There are a lot of other definitions. You found one, Mason? Clip? Yeah, like a clip from a movie, clipping someone's hair, the verb. A lot of things there. You find one? Defenestration, you throw something out of the window.
Yes.
It doesn't, they don't even use that anymore. When we take somebody's ideas and say someone's ideas are stupid now or antiquated, we'll say things like, English scholars used to follow Alan Bloom, but in the 1990s, he was defenestrated and nobody really pays attention to anything he was written anymore. So we say things more, we use it figuratively. I don't know if anybody even says it literally anymore. What do you guys think? What kind of word might work?
I got the word cut.
The word cut, I've had good papers on cut before. I think I've had a couple of them, that one will work. What do you think? Alright. Katie, found a word? What is it? Flat. Yeah, it's not a flat. The land is flat. A flat like an apartment. There's a lot of flats. What do you think? Oh man, you found a bunch of them. Famine, game, crazy, nosy, bizarre, and town. Speaking of bizarre, I've had good papers on the word weird. Weird is an ancient old word. It started off meaning something like the Weird Sisters in Shakespeare. It meant something like spooky, magical, probably evil, scary, whatever. If I use the word weird, we think of a bunch of, evil witches who are doing something horrible out in some field and sacrificing some cat to the gods or something. That's what they would have thought of 1,500 years ago. And then weird meant just anything, and it's gone from there to being something that's just odd or different, like, that's kind of weird. When we say that today, we don't mean anything sort of evil, mysterious, magical. We don't even think of that, or demonic. That's not what crosses our mind. What do you think? Sport. Sport, that one works.